33,000 years ago, in the forests, plains, and hills of Europe, changes began to appear in the early humans that had migrated north. Culture and technology amongst the tribes and simple communities that covered the region had begun to advance, and artifacts unearthed from across the continent show that it was developing fast. Parts of Europe had begun to transition from the Aurignacian culture into what has become known as the Gravettian culture. The former was characterized by the development of sculptures as art, highly developed tools made from bone or antler, and the beautiful detailed cave paintings synonymous with the Stone Age, such as those found in France's Chauvet cave. The shifts towards the Gravettian, however, showed that all of these technologies and concepts were becoming more advanced. Here, iconic Venus figurines and intricate carvings began to arise, more prominently than those seen in European culture before. Alongside the developments in art came new technological leaps, which gave Europeans new ways to manipulate their environment and carve out the world to their advantage. In today's video, we will be leaping into the Gravettian ourselves, examining how these people lived and what kinds of technologies they harnessed, as well as taking a look at the various forms of art they developed to express themselves out on the cold plains and dark forests of Europe. Before we examine the innovations and creations that set these people apart from their forerunners, let's take a look at who exactly was leading the cultural charge here. Alongside the fruitful archaeological sites that have gifted researchers with Venus figurines and new types of ancient tools, skeletons have been found. The people of the Gravettian culture were notably tall and slender, between 5'10" and 6'2", which is indeed exceptionally tall. Generally speaking, for historical humans, especially ancient ones, the average weight of these folk has been estimated to have been between 67 to 73 kilograms, or between 148 to 161 pounds, showing that they were also rather lean. These skeletons show that these people, in life, also had a high degree of muscle on their bodies, thanks to their physically active lifestyle. Studies conducted in 2023 showed that Gravettian culture people were split into two distinct clusters, the Fornol and the Vestinice. The former were situated in the west of mainland Europe, across France and Spain, while the latter was stretched across a much larger range, from Italy and Poland in the west, to Slovakia and parts of Russia in the east. While their genetics differ, they become more mixed with those situated on the edges of each cluster, which shows that people from various locations were mixing and breeding with one another. It is thought that the Fornol in the west were the ancestors of the European Cro-Magnon people who thrived in Europe after the Ice Age. One of the best archaeological sites that have allowed scientists to take a good look at the physical remains of Gravettian age people is located at Sungir in what is now Western Russia. The people here were some of the earliest to arrive in Europe, and their graves are often very well preserved. One such individual, known as Sungir Man, a 35 to 45-year-old male, is so well preserved that scientists have been able to reconstruct his face, giving us an almost eerie glimpse into the distant past. He was adorned with jewelry when he was buried, and his body was painted with ochre. It's believed that he passed away after a sudden accident, which appears to have been a result of neck damage, and was given special treatment at his funeral. He was perhaps a highly respected individual, or a man of high status amidst the tribe in which he lived. Europeans of the Gravettian culture were hunter-gatherers and would continue to be for some time until the advent of permanent settlements and agricultural societies. They were nomads of the plains and woodlands, who set up temporary residencies that could be packed up and moved with the movement of wild herd animals across the seasons. They seemed to have preferred food that was rich in fat, likely to give them the energy they needed to be constantly on the move throughout the year. Those living in colder climes seem to have had a notably higher focus on fatty meat than those who were living in southern Europe or the warmer lowlands. This tendency to move is what set them apart from the Neanderthals that had gone extinct some 7,000 years prior to the onset of the Gravettian. Neanderthals did not tend to travel great distances throughout the year, which gave nomadic bands of Homo sapiens the edge. Specific diets tended to change depending on where Gravettian groups were based. In coastal regions, seafood was eaten often, with gatherers wading through the rocky shorelines to pick up shellfish, while hunters speared seals and fish from saltwater pools and beaches. Gravettian-aged people living in the United Kingdom, specifically in coastal Wales, seemed to favour food from the sea. Inland, larger animals were taken. Gravettian-age peoples worked as teams to bring down large hoofed mammals such as reindeer that would seasonally migrate across the continent. There is sufficient evidence that these people were organised and advanced enough to bring down animals as large as mammoths, likely relying upon sharp, fluted spears to pierce the beast's thick hide. Mammoths would have been extremely bountiful quarries for bands of Gravettian hunters, and tribes could sustain themselves for long periods on just one kill. Hides, furs, bones and meat would all be used for different purposes around the temporary camps they set up. Tusks and ribs would form the basis of huts, while skins would be draped over the top to provide shelter from the snow and wind. Mammoth meat would have been rich in fat that provided Gravettian hunters with the energy they needed to be constantly on the move, while furs may have provided clothing, important insulation in a world that was colder than ours is today. The artifacts most closely associated with Gravettian Europe are, without a doubt, the famous Venus figurines. Over 200 individual Venuses have been extracted from archaeological sites across Europe, with some extending into Asia, and all of them follow a similar design pattern. They all depict human female bodies with exaggerated proportions, constructed from either limestone, clay, ivory or bone. The figures have very wide hips with exaggerated bellies, breasts or reproductive organs, and, interestingly, almost all of them lack arms, hands and feet. The heads of these figures are often abstract, with little to nothing in the way of facial features, and occasionally adorned in intricately carved jewellery or beads. The smallest of these figures measures just 3 centimetres or 1.2 inches tall, while the largest discovered was 40 centimetres or 15.7 inches in height. They are widely considered to be art forms, but what do they represent? Given the exaggerated features of the body that are associated with reproduction and childbirth, it is thought that the Venus figurines may have been fertility charms or offerings to an early fertility goddess. They may have played roles in fertility rituals, or simply may have been present in communities to offer good fortune and health to women and their newborns. Another theory states that they may have essentially been self-portraits by female artists within tribes, but the exact cultural meaning may sadly have been lost to the annals of deep time, given the fact that these people had no writing system to denote their beliefs and practices. It's important to note that these figures have no association with the Roman goddess Venus. They are thousands upon thousands of years older. The most famous Gravettian Venus figure is the Venus of Willendorf, an artifact unearthed at a Paleolithic site near the village of Willendorf in what is today Austria. It was discovered during a dig headed up by Austro-Hungarian archaeologist József Szombathy and his associates in the August of 1908, and was thought to have been carved as early as 30,000 years ago. Adorned with carved beads or braids on her head, the Willendorf figure is a very typical Venus in terms of structure and size, and is made from oolitic limestone. Interestingly, such rocks cannot be found near Willendorf. The closest source, in fact, lies on the other side of the Alps, near Italy's Lake Garda. However, similar figures are not known from here. Instead, the rock that composes the Venus may have come from what is now East Ukraine, where similar figures are known. Whether or not the Venus was carved first and then moved to Austria, or if the rock itself was transported to Austria to be carved, is not known. Just like the Aurignacian culture that came before, the people of the Gravettian were also known for their rock carvings. The most impressive of these come from the Aizpitata caves in the Basque region of what is now Spain. Here, engraved into the walls of the caverns, are numerous petroglyphs of ancient bison, a species that was likely hunted by the folk who made the engravings. Exaggerated features are present here too, with longer horns and unusual perspectives that mark the typical Gravettian style. These people also seem to have been adept cave painters. While the forms of animals are present on the walls of Gravettian caves, these people seem to prefer to express themselves by stenciling their handprints onto rock faces. In some sites, such as the Cosca cave in the Marseille region of France, such handprints are abundant. While the cave now lies 37 meters underwater after the melting of the Ice Age glaciers caused sea levels to rise, the paintings themselves are not submerged and are accessible only via a lift as part of a designated tour. Some of the handprints are missing fingers, which are more likely intentional, achieved by folding the digits into the hand when making the prints, rather than being a result of the artists having lost them. The prints were created by blowing ochre or charcoal through a bone tube, with the hand placed on the wall, creating a dark outline around a blank stencil of 30,000-year-old human hands. These pieces might have been left to remember ancestors across future generations. They may have had religious significance, or may simply have been a means of communication. With the onset of the Gravettian culture, numerous new forms of craftwork and technology came into play to assist the people of ancient Europe in transforming and adapting to their environment. Some of the most interesting innovations of the Gravettian are the introduction of woven nets to Europe, which may have been used along coastlines and lakes to ensnare fish and other marine animals for a tribe to eat. They could also have been efficient storage devices, relatively easy to make with enough material. More importantly, however, the Gravettian brought about the first oil lamps in Europe, basic, bowl-like structures made from stone, upon which a fuel could be burned to achieve heat or a light, if only for a brief time. Fire would have been extremely important in the exceptionally cold European Ice Age, providing illumination for the dark, dangerous nights and a means of providing signals in the gloom. All manner of weapons and hard tools began to arise during the Gravettian too. Knives and bifaces changed, being designed with a blunt, rounded back on one side to provide a better grip and prevent the user from cutting themselves while chopping into bone or meat. The curve could be attained by smoothing over the back edge with another stone, flaking off small chips until a safer hold could be achieved. Other changes occurred in arrowheads and spear points. In the Gravettian, we start to see the first tanged points, with short, narrow bases that could be used to affix the head onto a pole or shaft. This reinforces the attachment to the shaft and makes it harder for arrows to be dislodged when hunting a fast-moving animal. Another hunting innovation, the boomerang, appeared in Europe around this time. These curved wooden projectiles were thrown at targets to stun or even kill them if the target was small enough, and allowed hunters to quickly retrieve their weapons after use. Boomerangs are still used in Aboriginal communities across Australia and wider Oceania today, where they have become synonymous with indigenous culture. Some Gravettian sites have also shown evidence of ancient European weaving which, while basic, was used to make all manner of objects, such as baskets, mats, or even clothing. Plant fibers were extracted, which, when used alongside a bone needle, could sew two pieces of hide or fabric together, making fitted clothing, flexible containers, and insulation for the inside of a hut. Pollen analysis performed at sites in Eastern Europe show that milkweed or nettle may have been used to weave in the Gravettian, but fibers may also have been extracted from the bark of alder or yew trees. It wasn't just needles that Gravettian people constructed from bone though. Long limb bones or ribs from hoofed mammals were likely used to press and smooth pelts before they were sewn together or draped over a hut, while some bones were used in decoration. Teeth and claws, antlers and ulnars were all used for different purposes, providing a greatly expanded toolkit for Ice Age Gravettians to set up camp. The Gravettian culture shows just how innovative and advanced the people of the last Ice Age were. While popular culture has previously depicted these hunter-gatherers as violent, almost brutish folk, incapable of complex thought or emotion, all of the art uncovered from the Gravettian paints literally a very different story. These were spiritual, creative people who used tools to change the world around them to their own advantage. They were hardy enough to survive the low temperatures of the end of the Pleistocene, yet tender enough to leave their mark on the world for future generations. These were humans in their rawest, most creative form, ready to spring into the dawn of civilization and agriculture with the emergence of the Holocene.